students, welcome again to the course of Introduction to Economics. I'm your course instructor Shehzad Khan Durrani, lecturer, Institute of Business Studies, Guwahati University of Science and Technology, Hango campus. This is our lecture number 10 and our topic for today's lecture is Law of Supply. So let's start. Our outline, it includes law of supply. So we will try to understand this concept, and for this we will try to understand certain terminologies and subtopics, and they are: we will try to define and understand supply, the concept of supply, and then the proper definition of the law of supply and its concept, and then supply schedule in supply curve. We will do this, and then why the supply curve slope upward, right? So we will also try to cover this question as well. Let's start from the law of supply and supply definition, right? So the basic concept of supply. Supply refers to the quantity of a commodity which producers or sellers are willing to produce and offer for sale at a particular price in a given market at a particular time period, right? So supply actually refers to the quantity of a commodity, how much of a product, how many of products you want to produce, how much of a commodity or the quantity you want to produce, right? And then you want to supply that commodity which producers or sellers are willing to produce, right? So they are actually willing on that and offer for sale, and then they are offering it for sale at a particular price. So supply the products, the commodity that you are offering it for sale, it must have a particular price in a given market. You are offering it to a market at a particular time period, right? So there are three basic components of supply. One is a particular price. The supply, your supply that you are offering it to the market must have a particular price. It must be offered to a specific market and at a particular time period. For example, it can be seasonal, for example, or it can have of like different time periods. So what does it mean, the law of supply? We will try to understand this concept. Law of supply. Law of supply states that other things remaining the same, right? If you remain the other things, right? If what are some of the other things? Let's say, for example, there are some external forces that are present in the environment, right? Or it can be some other internal forces as well, right? So that's why we are saying that other things remain the same, right? So it means the political forces, the technological forces, for example, right? So law of supply states that if the other things remain the same, the quantity of any commodity the firms will produce and offer for sale, clear? So the quantity that the firm is producing and then are offering it for sale, right, rises with the rise in price, right? So it means, for example, that your offer to the market, it will rise with a rise in price and falls with fall in price. So it means there is a direct relationship between the supply and the price. Great. So if the price is increasing, right, the producer want to supply more products, right? So if the price is decreasing, the producer wants to offer less products, right, to the market. So law of supply, it actually means that higher the price, higher will be the quantity supplied. So if the price is high, the higher will be the quantity supplied, and lower the price, smaller will be the quantity supplied. So this is the actual theme or the idea behind the concept of the law of supply. So other things remaining the same, as we mentioned this in our definition. So it means the determinants other than own price, other than the price factor, such as the technology, such as goals of the firm. If the goals of the firm are changing, for example, right, maybe they will for example offer more products or less products. So that's why we are saying depends on the goals of the objective of the firm. Government policy, for example, the government have various policies, for example, right, like the taxation policies that they have. So the government policies, your supply also depends on that. And price of the related goods, there are other related goods that they are present, for example substitute goods, complementary goods, right? So the price of the related goods, it's also related to the supply or the commodity that you are offering it to the market, should not change, right? So this is the only condition, that these things will remain the same, these things will not change, right? Then, for example, if the higher the price, higher will be the quantity supplied, lower the price, smaller will be the quantity of supplied. So the law of supply works only if other things remain the same. If these things, for example, these determinants, for example, shouldn't change. So we discussed law of supply, and we also talked about the definition, the basic concept behind the law of supply. Now we will come to the supply schedule and supply curve. So supply schedule is actually a tabular representation of law of supply. It represents the different quantities of a product, right? So there are different quantities of a product that the seller is willing to sell at a different prices levels of the product, right? So there are two things, different price levels, right, and the different quantities of a product, right? That actually a tabular representation of the law of supply, and it's called supply schedule. So let's see. This is the tabular representation of the law of supply. Here, for example, at one side we have the price of milk per liter in rupees, which is given in rupees, right? So per liter 10 rupees, the price is 10. Then there is an increase in the price from 10 to 12, and then from 12 to 14, right? And then on the other hand, the quantity supplied, right? How much the producer is offering it to the market, right? So 1000 per day in liters, right? So he's offering it, for example, 10 liters, then 15, and then 12 liters. These are the quantity supplied, right? So look at this. When the price was 10, he was offering 10, right? The quantity that he was supplying it to the market. Then there was an increase in price, so 12. Now with an increase in price, the producer is now offering more to the market, so he increased the supply. So with an increase in price, there is an increase in the supply as well, right? Now he increased the price more from 12 to 14, right? So the producer is now offering more to the market, right? From 15 to 12. It means that if there is an increase in the price, we can see an increase in the quantity supplied as well, right? So this is called the law of supply. Now, supply curve. Supply curve is actually a graphical representation of the law of supply. So supply curve is a graphic representation of the correlation between the cost of a product, the price of a product or services, and the quantity supplied for a given time period. So the same relationship between the price and the quantity supplied, right? So we will see it through a graph, right? Here, for example, on x-axis we have the price, right? And on the y-axis, or you can call it the horizontal axis, we have the quantity supplied, right? Here, for example, as we saw in the table, the price was, for example, 10, the price 3 we can call it. Then the price increased to P1, we can call it 12, right? So the price is 12. Let me write it here. Here, for example, let's say the price is 10, right? Let's say the price is 10. Then we can see an increase in the price, which is 12. Clear? which is 12. Then we can see an increase in the price again, which is 14. Clear? So these are the prices given on the vertical axis, or you can call it the x-axis, on x-axis. Then on the y-axis we have the quantity supplied. When the price is 10, for example, so he was offering 10 to the market, right? The 10 for example kg of milk, like the quantity, it must be, you must represent it in the quantity that you are supplying, right? Then the price is increased, so the quantity is also increased, is according to the price, right? Now he's offering, for example, 15 to the market, right? I'm writing it from the table that we just discussed it earlier, right? So you can just draw it, this graph from the table. And then, for example, when the price was 14, so he was offering 20, right? So this is what there is. You can see when the price was 10, so the quantity was 10. When the price increased to 12, so the quantity, for example, increased to 15. He's offering more to the market. Clear? So supply curve, higher prices and supply expansion. You can see an expansion in the supply here. Here you can see an expansion in the supply, right? And this is actually the increase in the price. This actually represents what? An increase in the price. So it means that if there is an increase in the price, there will be an expansion in supply, right? So a rise in market price causes an expansion of supply. Producers are responding to the profit motive, right? Why? Because they want to earn more. So that's why there is an expansion here. A movement along the supply curve is caused solely by a change in price, right? So for example, that's why it's moving along the same curve. This is just one curve that we call it the supply curve, right? And it represents, for example, the supply of coffee or maybe milk or any other thing, right? So it's movement along the same curve. You are just changing the points, right? And that's actually called what? The change in supply, right? Clear? Now we will move to supply functions or determinants of supply. What are some of the determinants or functions, right? So supply functions studies the functional relationship between supply of a commodity and its various determinants, right? So now we are talking about the things which is other than the price, right? The determinants, for example, right? And also called supply functions. So supply is a function of Px, Pr, Nf, G, Pf, T, Ex, Gp. What are they? Supply is a function of them. These are the determinants, right? It can bring change in the supply curve as well. And because of that, just remember that because of that, the supply curve is actually shifting to the right or it is shifting to the left. So when it's shifting to the right, it actually means that you are increasing the supply. But if the supply curve is changing to the left, it means you are decreasing the supply. You are offering less products to the market, right? So what are they? Sx stands for supply of a commodity, the commodity, the product that you are supplying, the Sx, right? Then we have the Px is a function of, so supply of commodity is a function of Px, price of the commodity. There must be a change in the supply. It can be of PR. PR means price of the related goods, right? Like substitute goods like coffee and tea, they are the substitute, like Pepsi and Coke, right? Or it can be NF, the number of firms that they are available. Let's say there is an increase or expansion in the firms, right? So it means that there is more quantity that is available, right? So you will be switching to other products, and because of that there can be a change in the supply curve, right? Then we have goal of the firm. If the goal of the firm is changing, they want to for example come up with a different strategy or new product or bringing changes, etc. The PF, price of factors of production, right? For example, land, labor, capital, right? Entrepreneurship, right? So these are the factors of production. It also changes the supply of a commodity. And then we have the technological changes, for example, that is occurring around the world, for example. So that's why, for example, due to the technological changes, you are actually not producing that much. So if you are not producing that much because you do not have that much of advanced technology, you cannot offer good products to the market. And then we have the expected future price, right? The expected future price of product. So if the market is unstable, you are not sure, you are not sure about the government policies, right? Or maybe unstable situation, instability, for example, right? And the government policies, of course. So these are actually the determinants of the law of supply. Let's discuss few of them. So price of the commodity, what does it mean? So there is a direct relationship between price of a commodity and its quantity supplied, right? How? When price increases, supply also increases because it motivates the firm to supply more in order to get more profit. So for example, for more profit, they are going to supply more because there is an increase in the price. So there is a chance in the market, there is an opportunity, right? The economists, they are always looking for that opportunities, right? And it's a game of opportunities and how you can avail that opportunity, right? When price decreases, smaller quantity will be supplied as profit decrease, and if the profit decreases, nobody is interested. Nobody is, for example, is interested to supply goods to the market because they are not earning that much from the market. This is a graph. Like in this graph, as you can see, this is supply 1, for example, when the price was P, for example, and the quantity is, let's say it's Q naught. So with P naught and Q naught, this is the point, for example, right? Then there is a decrease in, let's say from 10 rupees to 8 rupees, the price decreased, right? So there is actually what happened? Shift in the supply, right? The supply actually reduces, right? So for example, if the price is decreased, the supply is also decreased, for example. And when you are decreasing the supply, for example, it means, for example, that the quantity of the commodity that you are offering it to the market is also decreased, right? But the demand of that product would increase because of the price decrease. Because of the price decrease, the quantity of demand can increase, right? So you can see, for example, they are supplying less, but you can see there is an expansion in the demand curve, right? Because of reducing when you are reducing the price, the demand, there is an expansion in the demand, there is an increase in the demand, right? Though, for example, you are not supplying that much to the market. And another determinant is the price of related goods, right? It also affects the graph of the law of supply, right? So producers always have the tendency of shifting from the production of one commodity to another commodity, right? So sometimes the producers are switching, right? Depends on the decrease and the increase in the price from one product to another, like coffee and tea, like Pepsi and Coke, right? These can be the examples of the price of related goods. If the price of another commodity increases, right? So what happens, especially substitute goods, producers will find it more profitable to produce that commodity. Let's say if the price of the coffee increase, right? So the producer will be switching to the coffee than tea, right? He will be producing more coffee, right? So why is that? Just because of, for the purpose of more profit. He wants to earn money, right? When there is an increase in the price, so he wants to switch that product, and that's called the substitute goods. Suppose that the seller of tea notice that the price of coffee increases, right? they may reduce the amount of resources devoted to selling of tea. He would reduce the resources that he devoted it to the tea, and it would come to the coffee, right? In favor of coffee, he would reduce that resources, right? And this is the graph, right? The same graph. Actually the producer here is switching from one product to another. Now let's consider this P1. It's the initial price, right? Now the producer is switching it, for example, right? There is an increase in coffee, right, in the price. Let's say this is price 10. This is price 12, right? This is P0, this is P1. Clear? Now he is switching it, for example, from this 10 to 12, right? So you can see what, if he's switching it to another product, right, there will be a shift. He is actually shifting the supply curve, right? And because of that, he would increase the supply, as you can see, increase in the supply here, right? And because of that, for example, the quantity demanded, which has an inverse relationship with the price, would decrease, right? So this is actually the demand contraction, right? And this is the price expansion. Clear? And this is actually the supply curve actually shift to the left here, right? Just because of the change in the price from low price to high. Another determinant of the law of supply is the policy of the government. The government, they are trying to change their policies like every year or like half of a year, right? So there are the certain policies the government are adopting are like taxation and subsidies policy of the government. These are the two kinds of policy, like adding new taxes or providing subsidies to various products. It affects market supply of the commodity. So how the taxation affect the price of the commodity or the supply of the commodity, and how subsidy affect the supply of the commodity. So let's see. Increase in taxation tends to reduce supply. So because of an increase in taxation, right, there is a reduce in the supply. On the other hand, subsidies, if the government are adding subsidies to a certain product, right, they want to facilitate the public, right? So it increased supply of the commodity. Just because of its subsidies, more producers want to invest there, right? So that's why there is an increase in the supply of the commodity. So let's see in graph, right? In the graph, for example, if there is an increase, for example, in the taxation, right? So increase in the taxation, what happened? What is the effect? It reduced the supply. So the supply is actually reducing, right? It's actually reduced the supply. And for example, if because of the subsidies tend to increase supply of the commodity, right? Just because the more producers are interested to offer product to the market. Our next topic is why the supply curve slope upward, right? What are some of the reasons that make the supply curve upward, right? Or the supply curve is moving upward, right? So we will try to understand. So why the supply curve slope upward? What are some of the reasons, right? So the level of price determines profit. If there is an increase in price, it means that you are earning more, right? So higher the price, higher the profit, and vice versa. And higher the price, the greater is the incentive for the producer. The producer, they are looking for the incentive, and they will have the incentives only if there is an increase in price, right? So they are producing more and supply more to the market if other things remain the same. What are the other things? Like the technological changes, or for example goal of the firm. So the determinants other than the price means other things remains the same if there is no change in that. So positive slope of supply curve is also caused by the rise in cost of production, right? If there is a rise in cost of production, right, So it is actually, the positive slope is actually caused by the rising cost of production, and rise of cost of production actually occur if there is an increase in production. So usually cost of production increases with an increase in production. So in this situation, a producer will produce and sell more units only at a higher price. For example, if there is an increase in production, right? And so for example, it will cause what? The rise in the cost of the production, right? So if he will increase the price, and this will cause the positive slope of the supply curve. So the rise in price also motivates other producers. Like if there is like an increase in the price of a certain product, so other producers, other manufacturers, they want to produce the same commodity to earn higher profit, right? So for the profit purpose, they are producing, they are coming up with the same commodity or the product. So look at this graph, we can see that the supply curve is sloping upward here, right? From the green line you can see that there is an increase in, for example, the price is, let's say, 10, so the quantity is 10. If the price is increased to 12, so the quantity, let's say, it's 15. So there is an increase in the quantity of supply, and with an increase in the price of coffee and the quantity supplied. So we can see that the supply curve actually shift upward. These are the references that I use while making. Thank you.